Everyone in the town heard her cries, but no one helped. Not the sheriff, not the neighbors, not even the people who passed her every single day. Until one stranger walked in. He didn't know her. He didn't owe her anything. But what he did next changed the entire town forever. This is the story of the cowboy who refused to look away. The town of Dry Hollow sat beneath a sky that never seemed to care about the people below it. Dust drifted through the streets like forgotten memories in the wooden buildings creaked as if they were tired of standing. No one came here unless they had nowhere else to go, and no one left unless they were running from something worse. In a small, weather-beaten house at the edge of town lived a young woman named Elira. She was known by everyone, yet seen by no one. Her voice had become part of the wind, something people heard but chose not to listen to. Her father had died years ago, leaving her alone with debts she could never pay and a reputation she did not deserve. Every night her cries echoed through the thin walls of her home, not cries of weakness, but cries of resistance, of someone refusing to break. Yet no one came, not the neighbors, not the sheriff, not even the preacher who spoke loudly of kindness every Sunday. The man who caused her pain was named Corvin Hale, a wealthy ranch owner whose name carried weight in Dry Hollow. He controlled the land, the cattle, and the fear in people's hearts. His smile was smooth and his voice calm, but behind closed doors he was something else entirely. Elira had tried to speak out once. She had gone to the town square, her voice shaking but determined. She told them everything, but the townspeople lowered their eyes and pretended the wind was louder than her words. The sheriff adjusted his hat and said there was no proof, and the others simply walked away, leaving her standing there alone with the truth heavy in her chest. So the nights continued, filled with her cries and the silence of a town that chose comfort over courage. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a stranger rode into Dry Hollow. His name was Rowan Vance, and he was not like the others. His coat was worn, and his eyes carried stories deeper than the desert itself. He had the look of a man who had seen too much and yet refused to look away. His horse moved slowly through the street as people watched from behind windows, whispering among themselves. Strangers rarely stayed long here, but something about Rowan felt different, like the air shifted slightly. When he passed, he stopped at the saloon, tied his horse, and stepped inside. The room fell quiet for a moment as boots tapped against the wooden floor. He ordered a drink and listened more than he spoke. And then he heard it. A faint sound carried through the open door, a sound that did not belong to laughter or music. It was a cry, soft but sharp enough to cut through the noise. Rowan turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing as he listened again. The bartender quickly spoke, saying it was nothing, just the wind playing tricks. But Rowan did not believe in tricks of the wind, not like that. Later that night, as the town settled into uneasy silence, Rowan walked the streets following the direction of the sound until he reached the edge of town where Elira lived. The cries were clearer, now filled with pain, but also something stronger, something unbroken. He stood there for a moment, listening, his jaw tightening. Then the door burst open and Corvin stepped out, adjusting his coat as if nothing had happened. He froze when he saw Rowan standing there in the shadows. The two men locked eyes, and in that moment something passed between them, something unspoken but understood. Corvin smirked slightly, asking if the stranger was lost. Rowan did not answer immediately. He simply looked past him into the dim light of the house, where Elira lay struggling to breathe. Then he stepped forward slowly, his voice calm but heavy with purpose, saying he had just found what he was looking for. Corvin laughed, brushing past him, as if he were nothing. But there was a flicker in his eyes, a brief moment where confidence slipped. Rowan watched him walk away, then turned toward the house. Inside, Elira looked up, startled, her face marked by exhaustion, but her eyes still burned with life. She expected another shadow, another pain, but instead she saw someone different, someone who did not look away. For the first time in a long time, the silence in the room felt different, not empty, But waiting, morning came slowly to dry, hollow as if the sun itself hesitated to rise over a town that had forgotten how to stand for anything, the streets filled with the usual routines, people moving like ghosts, pretending everything was normal, pretending they had not heard anything the night before. But something had changed. Rowan Vance stood outside the small house, his presence like a stone dropped into still, water sending ripples through the quiet town. Inside, Elira sat wrapped in a thin blanket, watching him through the doorway, unsure of what to expect. Hope was a dangerous thing in dry hollow. It had a way of being taken from you. Rowan finally spoke, asking her name. She hesitated before answering, softly saying, "Elira." He nodded, as if committing it to memory, then asked, "Who did this?" She looked away, her silence heavy with years of being ignored. Rowan did not push. Instead, he said he already knew. Those words hit differently, not like the empty promises she had heard before, but like something real, something that carried weight. For the first time, she felt something unfamiliar. She felt seen. By midday, the whispers had spread. Through town, the stranger was asking questions, and not the kind people were comfortable answering. Doors closed a little faster. Conversation stopped when he passed, and the sheriff began to feel the pressure of something he could not control. Corvin Hale sat on his porch, watching it all unfold, his confidence still intact, but his eyes sharper now, calculating. He knew men like Rowan, or at least he thought he did, drifters who played hero until they realized how things worked in places like Dry Hollow. But Rowan was not leaving. That evening he walked straight into the saloon again, but this time the air was different, heavier, charged with something close to fear. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, asking why no one had helped her. No one answered. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then the sheriff stepped forward, trying to assert control, saying this was not the stranger's concern. Rowan looked at him calmly and said that it became his concern the moment everyone else decided it was not theirs. Those words landed like a strike against something the town had buried. Corvin entered shortly after, his presence filling the room. He approached Rowan, slowly smiling that same smooth smile, asking if he was causing trouble. Rowan stood still, meeting his gaze without hesitation, saying he was ending it. The room seemed to hold its breath. Corvin laughed, but it sounded different now, less certain. He warned Rowan that this town belonged to him. Rowan replied quietly that no town belongs to a man who builds it on fear. The tension snapped. What followed was not just a fight of fists, but of everything the town had ignored for years. The struggle spilled into the street, drawing people out of their homes. They watched as the illusion of control began to crack. Rowan did not fight like someone trying to prove something. He fought like someone who had already decided what needed to be done. And Corvin, for the first time, felt something he had not felt in a long time. He felt vulnerable. The fight ended with Corvin on the ground, his power stripped away, not just by force, but by the eyes of the town finally watching, finally acknowledging. Rowan stepped back, breathing steady but unbroken. He looked around at the people who had stayed silent for so long and said nothing because nothing more needed to be said. The truth was already there. Elira stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands trembling but her head held high. The cries that once filled the night were gone, replaced by something stronger. Not just her voice, but the beginning of change. The sheriff slowly removed his badge, as if realizing too late what it truly meant, and the townspeople shifted uneasily, no longer able to pretend they had not seen. Rowan walked over to Elira and simply nodded. No grand speech, no promises, just acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. Days later, Dry Hollow began to change, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. The silence was no longer the same. It carried awareness now, responsibility. And Elira no longer cried into the night, because someone had finally listened. And more importantly, someone had finally acted, and that changed everything.